Hey there, toy collector friends and, well, Star Wars fans alike, really. Welcome back to the channel. I'm the time-traveling toy collector, and this is another entry into my Toy-volution series, which is really where I get a chance to have a chat with you about some of my thoughts around toys and their journey through time. And I'm particularly focusing here, we have Grogu, and I'm using Grogu in this format. I mean, you can see him here. Well, I was going to say he's a big fella. He's obviously not a big fella, but in this particular iteration of Grogu, he's quite a big fella. And he's beautifully well put together. You know, it's he's well dressed, but he's got a very large. Oh, and since I put him in there, he's got quite a dirty. Oh no, it's not as dirty. It's just his natural habitat. But he's sort of super cute, and he's very poseable. He's got his little poseable hands, so he can wield the Force. But yeah, I'm using him as my kickoff point for this. He's a representation, if you like, of well, I'm going to speak. I can only speak purely personally. My relationship with toy collecting, and in particular. And those of you who've been following some of my earlier videos will know this. My toy collecting initially really started off with Star Wars figures, and with R2-D2, who was my first ever classic Star Wars figure back in the back end of the 1970s. And again, back then it was a little plastic thing with some very exciting chrome coloured top that clicked when you turned it round, which made no real sense, but it really hooked us as a generation. And I know there'll be some people watching this who were part of that generation, and there'll be some who were not, who are now perhaps finding Star Wars toys and other toys for the very first time. But I just wanted to sort of reflect a bit on the sort of phenomenon of the toy, particularly through the focus of Star Wars toys, because I think Star Wars toys, and other people will say, well, actually it's more sort of Barbie and Ken, and others will say it's G.I. Joe, and everyone will have their own kind of individual position. But for me, the first major commitment to collecting figures from a certain range was Star Wars. And I don't think, and I could be wrong, but I don't know prior to that Star Wars sort of merchandise revolution whether there was anything else quite like the onslaught, because I think that's what we can call it really, the onslaught of collectibles that came to fruition to accompany that franchise, both the first time around and then, of course, when the prequels came. Since I think there was a real shift, a real Toy-volution, if you like, when that happened, because we had lived with since the 70s. So we had the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, most of the 90s anyway, where there was only those original Star Wars toys, and then there's a bit of Power of the Force stuff, which I never really took to, because I thought the bodies looked a little bit out of proportion and so on and so forth. And yeah, so for me, there was a real sea change in terms of how I felt about Star Wars figures. Now, some of you will be aware that Hasbro have started bringing out vintage collection and retro collection figures, which is a reuse of the old molds being repackaged on, if you like, the retro classic format backing card, and I'll have a look at a couple of those in a moment. But by the same token, as I said, the vintage collection, which is modernized characters being released in the style of the old version of Star Wars, sorry, not Star Trek. And also we sort of have the evolution of that into the Black series, which of course came much later in the toy line chronology for Star Wars. But again, so here we have this sort of, for example, in terms of breadth of merchandise, we have this version of Grogu, And then we have, and some of you will have seen me do a review of this already, but I'm just going to sort of pop it next to him here. So this was sort of, so we've got Grogu, and then we've got sort of Neo Grogu, which is the child action figure as it appeared in the retro collection range to make it appear very old school, you know, like old school Star Wars action figures, which you know is a very wise merchandising approach and technique, and I can fully understand why they would do such a thing. But I think it's really interesting, and I've talked about this in a couple of other videos, but the relationship that we have and the connection that we have to those toys from the 70s and the 80s really outstrips the relationship that we have, well, certainly that I have, with anything that came much later than that. And I know it's attached to nostalgia and our connection at that time, but I don't know that anything's quite had the same level of phenomenon as the original Star Wars range. And I think that's possibly why we're seeing this resurgence of old school packaging. And I just mentioned that they're bringing out that retro range of original Star Wars figures. So I'm just going to drop this in. This is from that box set that released recently, the first wave of the original Star Wars figures. Which again, it's a shame they feel the need to overly stress that it's from the retro range by putting a sticker on it. We don't need that. But already you can see from this figure, which is, you know, the Stormtrooper from the original Star Wars, it's the original mould. It has no head articulation. It's got no knee articulation, bicep, elbow, wrist articulation, no waist swivel. All the things that if you watch any sort of toy review videos these days, all the things that people say as a matter of course, oh yeah, you've got this, you've got that, you've got the other. No, we didn't have any of that. These were little bricks of plastic. They may as well have been made of Lego, with very limited articulation, and we lapped it up because our imagination was allowed to run absolute riot, and we loved it. As I say, we lapped it up. But of course, everything evolves. Gaming evolves, the quality of toys evolve, engineering evolves, and of course that's right and proper, so it's driven things forwards. But I think you then look at conventions, and as some of you will know, I was at the Star Wars Celebration 2023 in London, well, actually just a couple of weeks ago at the time of recording. And it really brought home to me, especially when I saw some of those traders who had not retro collection re-releases, but original figures, some of which were going for the likes of £3,000. You know, that on some levels, that's a ludicrous situation. But on other levels, it really speaks to how connected we can become to these parts of our childhood that we want to reclaim, that we want to scoop up, hold close, and feel safe with and comfortable with. Now, I guess some people will be driven by being completists who need to have all of those things in their collection, and I fully understand that mentality. But also there will be those who are frankly just so keen to just have a little portion of their childhood, or that part of their childhood that they missed out on. And I think that's where we find ourselves talking about holy grails of toys. And I think I might do a totally separate holy grails of toys video later in this sort of Toy-volution series. But for me, here we have, you know, the sort of different points in the timeline of Star Wars figures, although they're all relatively recent. But this sense of going back to that age of nostalgia, so we don't have 84 points of articulation in an action figure, which we then have to pay for. Yes, they're still not cheap. Again, these were about £1, no more than £2, and often when they're reduced to clear, less than £1 back in the day. And now if we're lucky, they're £12.99, £15, £16.99, and then some of them much more when you start adding in some additional accessories. But that also is in line with where we are inflation wise and the evolution of money over time, so where we are in terms of normal costs. So, you know, that's not that wildly out of alignment with what back in the 70s and the 80s we were paying. It's just the nature of economics and the marketplace. But what I'm really interested in at the moment is how I felt when I saw old-fashioned toys and some of the new releases. I've been so careful, and I've said this in some other videos as well, been so careful not to go down the rabbit hole that is Star Wars toys. Back when I was a kid, and not because I was spoilt, but because I saved pocket money, maybe a little bit because I was spoilt, but not mainly, because again, for me, birthdays and Christmas was when I got my main influx of new toys. And, you know, for a good few years, that was driven by Star Wars. Whether it was the AT-AT or the AT-AT, depending what school of thought you're in. I had that for Christmas, and I was so psyched to get that. It was amazing. And the action figures, and I collected the action figures, and I'd have pocket money and money that saved up when I went on holiday. When I went on holiday, what would I do? I'd usually spend it on Star Wars action figures because I could afford them on pocket money. I'm not sure if that's still the case now, but I could afford them then. And, you know, I think they were built to be played with. So we weren't sitting around going, oh, fantastic, I've just spent £2, not quite £2, well, £2 with change. I had to buy some pick and mix as well on my latest Star Wars figure, bang, bang. I was picking this up, ripping it off the card and playing with it by the time I was out of the shop. So I still am constantly surprised and amazed when I see so many people who have mint on card Star Wars original figures. And I can only assume that some of them have found them in maybe shops that have gone bust, and they found crates of unsold figures and they've gone result. I don't know how people had the foresight back in the 70s and the 80s to collect these and leave them on their card. And I think it's caused a real shockwave through the toy market that we're still feeling, very much so today, because nowadays we see people buying 2 of things, 3 of things. If you try and buy some stuff, so again, on the back of the recent Star Wars celebration, Hasbro, they don't just do this, to be fair, with Star Wars products, they do it with Transformer stuff as well and G.I. Joe stuff, but notably with Star Wars, I think it's fair to say, and also with some Transformer stuff, they limit the quantities, and other online retailers as well, limit the quantities that one purchaser can buy of the same figure to avoid some of that online scalping. But people are buying multiple versions so they can possibly, I'm assuming, have one, maybe take it out of the packaging, and then have other ones that they can sell on to the secondary market and therefore make something of a profit. You know, and again, I'm not here to sort of be disparaging about people making a profit, because, you know, it's their business, they need to make a profit. I totally get it. But let's be realistic here. Who are you making a profit off? Children? Or adults? And I think that's another thing to consider. I think we really are seeing that shockwave that is now really leaning into the somewhat, you know, shocking fact. I think it's a shocking fact that most toys are no longer being produced. Most toys in certain ranges, let's say, because obviously you can see preschool stuff, and there are toys for kids. I'm not saying that there aren't, but there's an awful lot of really targeted marketing now that is for the adult collector. The packaging now, this packaging really strikes a chord with adult collectors of a certain age, given, but even down to what's being produced now. And as I say, I was at the Star Wars celebration, and I did so well not to get, because I do like to have complete collections. I'm not as bad as I used to be, and I do train myself to let things go, because I realise I can't have everything, which is, you know, a painful realisation, but one that it was very important that I arrived at. But I saw the quality, which I'd never really allowed myself time to look at, the quality and the presentation of some of the newer waves and newer lines in Star Wars toys and Star Wars action figures. And I've got to be honest, I did start to get seduced by those toys. And I'm now talking probably quite significantly about the Black Series toys, because it's almost like a higher class of action figure. So yes, you can find the same action figures in the vintage range or the sort of retro collection ranges. But they're deluxe figures. They are toys made as toys, but packaged and sold as collectibles, which is of course great, but it's then suddenly making these toys no longer toys. The function of a toy is to be played with, to be enjoyed, to be, you know, something for entertainment purposes. And I'm gonna, you know, as I said, I was seduced by it, so I started looking around and going on that secondary market, and I was pleasantly surprised to be able to find some items that were not extortionately priced. I also found a couple of items that were, I'll say extortionately priced, but equally they were probably quite reasonable for what they were. And I sort of actively pursued them on you know, auction sites, etc. And some of those we shall talk about in a different video, I don't doubt, probably quite soon. But one thing that I managed to pick up was, and it's not, you know, I would say for a casual collector it's not super exciting, but was this figure. And it's Black Series, and it's you know, it's beautifully packaged. So here we have the Black Series, and it's Black Series Luke Skywalker Jedi Master, as he appeared at the back end of The Force Awakens and the beginning of The Last Jedi. And it's really, for me, this epitomizes, I mean, it's a bit dusty, it's because, as I say, secondary market, sealed, not been taken out of the packaging, doesn't actually come with any accessories that I can determine. Nice little sort of picture of Mark Hamill there, Luke Skywalker Jedi Master, but the red, the black, the sort of minimalist Black Series packaging, all of that. We turn it around, it's number 46. We've got a little bit of information there about Luke Skywalker, the character, the inevitable Disney logo, the red, the big 46, which is a little bit in keeping with their Transformer Studio Series line, which also is numbered in a similar fashion. But this is not a product, I'm sorry, Hasbro, sorry, Stormtrooper and Grogu, I'm just going to move this in shot slightly more, but this is not a figure that is being targeted at kids. I would say the way that this is being marketed, it's very classy, don't get me wrong, but I think it's that classiness that makes it far more for an adult collector, which is great. You know, I am the target audience, and I've managed to stay away from it for a long time until, well, now. But we can already see, and I'm just going to use the Stormtrooper as a comparison, we can already see the differences in terms of the quality of the figure. In this period of time, back in the originals, and also in the re-releases that are coming and being re-released, we had, if we were lucky, a vinyl cape, sometimes a cloth cape, but more often than not a vinyl cape, and an accessory. And very little articulation, and that was your baseline figures. That's what you got. That's what it was all about, really. That's what it was. But here we have Luke Skywalker, and I'm sorry, but I think the level of detailing on the facial sculpt is really good. It's really, really good. And this figure has, you know, is decked out in soft furnishings, you know, to not put too fine a point on it. There's his robotic hand. I've not taken him out yet, and I probably will, and I might do a little video on him anyway, because I've not done a huge amount of Star Wars videos. But then but part of that is because I've not gone down the route of collecting new Star Wars figures. But here I am, looking at these, thinking, actually, I could very, very much be seduced by some of these Black Series, these upcoming releases of Star Wars retro and vintage collection figures. And I'm sort of there for that now, and I'm a bit worried what this means for me in my future. So stick around and we might find out. But I think it paints a really interesting picture of how we as collectors, and I say we, but I know I speak for myself, so it'd be interesting to know if people have similar views or completely disagree, which is your prerogative. Do let me know in the comments for the video. But I really think that we're seeing, and have seen for some time, a clear shift that the toys that we loved as kids are now being brought back, rebranded, remarketed, repackaged, but the audience has shifted. Because let's be honest, it's usually going to be either pocket money or parental or carer purchases for the children. And pocket money is usually from the carers or the parents anyway, so on family, birthday, whatever. But the main consumer is going to be the adults. And I just wonder whether along the journey of toy collecting, of playing with toys, we do lose something on the day we start saying, I'm not going to take it out of the packaging. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very, very clear that in this collection, which is the collection that came in the box set, I've done a separate video for it already. It's a box set of 6, and there's a second box set coming out imminently from Hasbro, which will give us the first 12 original Star Wars figures re-released as a box set of collectibles. They are designed to be collectibles. They know what they're doing there, and I know what they're doing there, and I'm here for it. And I haven't taken them out because I want to preserve that which was lost from my childhood. That doesn't say that, and I was quite open about the fact that I would, if I got the chance and it wasn't so costly, because they are costly, I would get a second box set, and I would have a box set that I would keep so that I've got them intact, not to sell on, purely for my personal, joy and satisfaction as I age ever older. But I would also want to have them that I could take out and play with. And I don't know if anyone's going to be at the London Film and Comic Con this year. I will be there, and I'm really going to go back and start looking not only at some of the places that are selling Star Wars figures, but I'm also going to start looking at some of those that have them loose in bins, because that's, I think, because sometimes they're like £1, £2, £5, something like that, and you just rummage through the buckets until you find something that you like, or a few things that you want. And then you can do a bit of haggling, say, well, I'm going to have 5. Can you give me a special price? But I think I'm going to do that because, for one thing, I don't want to spend another, well, not another, because I got it for a really good price, but I don't want to spend in excess of £100 for a set of 6, only to be opening them up and then losing them and damaging them. So if I can find some of the original ones and they're loose, I'm going down that route. But I suppose the moral of this is, for my thinking, is I want to see how this develops and how it evolves. Already we've seen some special announcements and releases coming at the Star Wars celebration, and I'm very much looking forward to getting my hands on some of those, because you do get whipped up into a consumer frenzy of nostalgia and excitement about the quality of some of those products that we never had as a child, coupled with the ones of the quality that exactly what we had as a child, and they're beautifully made, but in terms of the quality of the articulation and the engineering, if you will, it's not great. But we are paying for the memories and the experience. We're not paying for this kind of articulation and quality of attention to detail and sculpture, which I just think is an interesting situation. And it also leads, I think, to that sense of holy grails that I mentioned earlier, that I will do separately. But for me, one of my key holy grails was something in the Star Wars range. Sorry, I keep saying Star Trek. Over to my right-hand side, which you can't see, I've just got a recent arrival from a Star Trek Starships range, which I got from recovered stock from Eagle Moss. So it keeps coming into my sight, and therefore I keep saying what it says on the box, which is Star Trek. So I'm not going to talk about that here. You'll see what that is very, very soon. But yeah, so I think Holy Grails, I think it really originated with some of the Star Wars things that people didn't get their hands on. And for me, the one that really resonates is the Imperial Troop Transporter, which was it was an early attempt at an electronic lights and sound type thing. I don't think it actually had any lights, but it had certain phrases recorded. And I don't think it even appeared in the original films. It was one of those things that didn't appear, but was just created alongside it. And it was a lovely looking vehicle. And it's one of those things that got away from me. I never had it. I think one of the recent series actually featured the troop transporter in live action, which, you know, got myself and lots of other collectors and fans of the series super excited, because there it was finally. And again, it's one of those things that I look for when I'm at a convention. The thing that got away, because even though I don't have any figures to put in it, I mean, I might have to get some army building stormtroopers to go in there. I don't otherwise have anything to go in it, but I would really want to. I would really want to have that, because I never had it. So again, and there's a little bit of me that goes, well, being rational, why? What are you going to do with it? And I can't answer myself there. I don't know the answer to that. I just know that I would want to have it, because it's that thing that I never had. And I think that's a lot of what makes for this Holy Grail feeling that I think a lot of people can probably relate to, is that sense of, I never had it, I'd really love to get it. And that's, I think, what brings a lot of people back to toy collecting. But also, as I say, there's other ranges and other things that will be your Holy Grails. So perhaps ahead of me doing a video on that, feel free to drop me a comment below to say, what's your Holy Grail toy? And I might make reference to some of those in that future video. Anyway, thanks for spending the last 27 or so minutes. That's quite a long time out of your day. I appreciate it. I know there's lots of other things you could be watching. If you want to have a look at any of my Star Wars figure reviews, by all means do so. You'll be able to find them on my channel, along with lots of other options for you to explore. Thank you so very much for sticking with me. I would have so appreciated if you'd hit that like button. Similarly, subscribe to the channel, because you never know what's coming next. I'll tell you what is coming soon, a little bit more about some of the Black Series figures, because, as I say, I have been a little bit seduced by those. Excuse me. Choking on my own expenditure. It's terrifying. Anyway, thank you for sticking around. I'll see you in a future video, and it just remains for me to say that a thing of beauty really is a toy forever. May the Force be with you. Goodbye for now.